I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a few more people wandering in and rudely jostling around through the audience and sitting in your bro space. You're comfortable, so you're going to have to put your bag on the floor. It's so annoying, I know. But thanks for coming out this morning. I know it's bright and early for those of you who are out having fun last night. I don't know what the average time in was last night, but actually I got back to the room and thought, I'm gonna, 10:30. I'm set, just gonna prepare. Was up watching TV till 1, up at 5 because my body just wakes up at that time no matter what I do. But thanks for coming. This is an interesting session. When I was approached by a couple of the Microsoft folks and they invited me to do this session, and I said, what do you want me to do around this topic? It's kind of it's strange. It's like I'm not demoing a product. There's not a tool. There's not a framework or a specific strategy around that. But there's a reason why they asked me to do this topic, and I know that it's very important. A lot of people have questions, some very passionate feelings around what is happening to the role. And to share some of my thoughts and experiences. For those that, I just forgot I did that. For those that don't know me, my name is Christian Buckley. I am a 4-time MVP with SharePoint for 3 years, just switched over to Office 365. I'm with a company called GT Consult. We're based out of South Africa with an office in Bellevue, Washington. That we are a consulting company, kind of the traditional consulting, but we also do managed services. But my background, for those that don't know me, I do a lot of writing around SharePoint. So a lot of the examples I'll bring up is SharePoint people, SharePoint space, but certainly this topic is not a SharePoint-specific topic. But I also run a monthly tweet jams. I don't know if anybody participates in those, who has come across those. Get there, if you use Twitter, you've seen your Twitter feeds fill up once a month with the Collab Talk tweet jams. But I've written fairly extensively, and one of the busiest tweet jams was last October around the topic of what is happening with the IT pro role. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. My background is not as an IT pro. I've been in tech for 25 years. My undergrad is in marketing. But on the technical side of marketing, my background is as a business analyst and technical project manager. Now I run the consulting team and the practice for the Americas for GT Consult. But I've managed IT pros, I've seen the changes around that. But because of the volume that I write about and talk about in the community, I like to think that I can be fairly balanced in my opinion about that. It's almost like an analyst or a journalist perspective on what is happening. And so that's what I'm reporting on. The things that I'm going to be sharing today in the input is not from me. Well, there are a couple things that I threw my opinion in there, but it's very much from the community. So I'm going to share their thoughts, their words, literally their words. I've got some of the visuals are tweets and feedback as I interviewed about 30 people in depth and share their thoughts. And the other thing I should say is that the end of this, unfortunately, there is no, and these are the 5 things that you do. That list doesn't exist. Because one of the things, if for those that are in the SharePoint space, they understand this. When people say, well, what is happening to my IT pro role? The answer is, it depends. It really does depend on what you're doing, what your company is doing, what your trajectory is, what your goals are, your own individual professional goals. I'm going to go through some of these sections up front. I want to jump right into the conversations that have been happening and get your feedback. And the other thing I should say is that, this is much more about a conversation. The hardest part about this format is I love these things to be very interactive. If people have questions, generally when I speak, I like people to raise hands to join in the conversation and let it be driven that way. It's difficult to do with this size of crowd. But if you do have questions, we do have microphones. Please feel free, stand up, make a spectacle of yourself. I'm already up here, so I'm okay. But this is, I know for a lot of people, and I don't mean, while I tend to joke around a lot, and I realize that there's a very serious topic that we're about to go through. This is people's livelihoods. This is career. People have valid questions around this. There is, while I have some jokes and things throughout here, trying to keep it light and entertaining and move along, there's a lot of great feedback from some of your peers from within the community. So I think there are some good takeaways here. And the other thing is that everyone that I quote, their Twitter handles are here. And I would say that if you see somebody that you agree or disagree with that you want to have an exchange with, please reach out to them. I think that's what we need to do as a community. I think that's the most important thing about a community. The hardest thing for a lot of people is actually going and reaching out to these individuals. So I know for those that do a lot of speaking out in the community, and I've certainly those that aren't participating in the SharePoint Saturday phenomenon around the world, is that most of us who are on kind of the speaking circuit that are doing these things, we're doing it because we want to have these interactions and talk with people, share our experiences, and get your feedback. So don't be shy there. So what's driving the change within the organization? You've probably not heard this term, but it has something to do with what we call the cloud. I was going to use that image of Dr. Evil, but it would have been yanked from my slides. Actually, these are some interesting things that Microsoft, so I'm very involved, for those that are Microsoft partners, IAMCP is the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners. If you are a registered partner of Microsoft and not a member of IAMCP, you should consider it. But I was the president of the Seattle chapter for 3 years, and now I'm on the board. And with the benefit of being in Seattle and the Bellevue area is we have a steady stream of Microsoft executives, like little-known names like Kevin Turner, COO, come and speak to our group occasionally. But we get this great data that's out through the partner community where they're talking about the change that's happening from a Microsoft perspective. Now, I'm not going to go through these things in detail, but you can see some of the stats of what Microsoft is reporting on in the last year. I don't have the latest. I know they're going to be refreshed going into July in WPC, the partner conference. But the revenue is on the rise. Their projections, they see that things are shifting. Now, this is the Microsoft slides. I'm going to show you some of my thoughts and the data that I've been able to come up with. But that cloud is driving a lot of change. You see a shift in dollars. And what we've seen over the last decade is a shift from that capital expenditure to go out and build the infrastructure ourselves towards that operational expenditure. Now, I certainly have seen a lot of this. In 2001, I don't know if anybody's heard of a company called E2Open. No, by chance, any hands? Yeah, dang it. I helped start that company while I was at the beginning of it. Well, they went public a couple years ago, so I was proud to see that. But I was actually hired to help create a hosted collaboration platform. Sound familiar? But launched it in 2001. And it was built on a competitor's technology platform. It's funny enough, I was contacted by their teams a couple years ago where they're seeing all of their customers are moving to SharePoint. And so they had questions about SharePoint. So all these competing technology guys. But all of like going out and doing deployments with little companies like Hitachi, Matsushita, Sony, Omron, like these massive manufacturing technology companies, in 2001, 2002, 2003 timeframe, were having a real difficult time letting go of their on-prem infrastructure and moving intellectual property out to the cloud. Here we are 12 to 15 years later, and a lot of the exact same concerns exist. We've come a long way, but when I look at these projections and people that talk about the next 3 to 5 years, everyone's going to be out in the cloud, like all their production systems. I joined what is now Office 365 team. I was there for a couple of years in 2006. So at the beginning of the program. When I joined Microsoft, there was one customer on hosted SharePoint, Energizer. So I helped with customer 2 and forward. And so a lot of that, the projections, like everyone's going to be moving towards this, that was 2006. We're almost 10 years later, and that flip of the switch of everyone jumping to the cloud has not happened. And I'm not saying that it's not going to move towards the cloud. I will say that all of those systems, all of you sitting here that are saying that there are certain core systems which will never move to the cloud, I say those systems will eventually be in the cloud. I'm just not foolish enough to put a date on it. I might not be alive when they eventually move, but they will. And if not, you'll win my hover car. But you have all of these options that are out there. So again, I don't need to go through in detail. You've probably all seen this slide of the various options that are out there. And of course, we're familiar with Microsoft's strategies around these things. I did kind of a precursor, if anybody caught it. I did very rapid fire in the expo hall, 20-minute session, talking about some of this, that there are just options that are out there. What I really like around the messaging for the 2016, especially the SharePoint guide, the SharePoint 2016, is that it's about having options. It's the it depends, to scale. It's saying that, for certain workloads, it makes sense to have on-prem because of the customizations that we have, or some of the security concerns around intellectual property. But for the bulk of our workloads, we can move out in the cloud, and I can have this federated, consistent experience for my end users, my partners, and my customers. So you can go and build to meet your needs. That's the vision, and I do believe in that. Interesting stats, though. Am I missing the top of this slide? Okay, but I was at the Gartner event in 2013, in February 2013. Gartner holds an event. It was down in San Diego. It might be in San Diego every year. But Gartner pushed out some numbers. And this was in beginning of 2013, was kind of at the height of the Microsoft all in. We're all in. Ballmer was constantly talking about how they were all in. You're a fool if you're not in the cloud. And that was kind of, and I was working for an ISV, and for a lot of partners, we were kind of angry that we were almost eyes rolled that we would consider still being on-prem in some of the assets. And I think things have become softened around that. But Gartner came out and said that their data showed that of interviewed companies from the Fortune 500 that it was not moving quite as fast to the cloud as had been anticipated, and that there's just other data that they brought in. But so they talked about 45% of IT budgets will be devoted to IT the cloud initiatives, 15% public cloud. But the Global 2000 still 70% still having their on-prem environments. Now this is a couple years ago, this data. And I don't believe it's changed much from these numbers. And so at the Gartner event, they shared their data. They said 35% in the next 5 to 7 years, 35% of existing on-prem SharePoint customers were saying never move to the cloud. We'll never move these systems to the cloud. While 15% were either already moving or said that we're going to be 100% in the cloud in the next 5 to 7 years. That leaves 50% that were saying we're going to be hybrid. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but that's 85% of customers saying that they're going to have infrastructure on-prem in 5 to 7 years. This was 2013. What's interesting is at the Worldwide Partner Conference in July of that year, Microsoft adopted these numbers. I heard it over and over again from the leadership in Office and SharePoint that they had picked up the Gartner data points. And we talked to them about that. A year later, going back to WPC, met with some senior folks within the Office and the SharePoint teams and talked about that. And I asked about the state of the Gartner data a year before. And this is what one of the leaders, executives, told me. That they see it now as 20% are now saying that they'll never move. A huge shift in a year, and this is just last July. Huge shift. Now, a lot of this credit has to go with Microsoft is working so hard to answer the security questions and needs, to get the certifications. They've done a fantastic job. And to be perfectly honest, if you're out there and you're concerned that we have certain legal restrictions, we have certain certifications that we need to meet, and these designated certifications, and Microsoft has those certifications, what then is the issue with you moving if they've met those certs? Now, if you have standards that Microsoft has not met, like it's not yet HIPAA compliant, some of the aspects of the solution, that's a valid reason to not be moving to the cloud yet. But 20% last summer would never move. 70% now hybrid. Now, what happened, and this is what the Microsoft exec said was interesting, was that the percentage that said we will be 100% in the cloud, actually, they saw it being squeezed by the center. Interesting. Just interesting stuff. And then this came out, actually, an article this week. If you did, I slipped this slide in. This was a quote by Seth Patton and was in the CMS Wire article. 80% of Fortune 500 companies still use SharePoint on-prem, with 38% using Office 365. So when you're starting to think about the IT pro role, that suddenly these environments would just go away. I know that's just part, I'm not just saying, like, again, I believe that eventually everything will be out in the cloud. So you can't just say, well, hey, for the next 30 years, my career with on-prem is going to be secure. It's not what I'm saying. I think just the reality is that there's time around this transition. It is a transition. But you need to start thinking strategically about it. But one of the things that I wanted to do, and this is in all seriousness, is, what if we didn't have this role? What if this role melted away? And you're going to see some of the feedback from people in the community that feel that's exactly what's happening, that the role is irrelevant. You have developers and you have like power users, and there's no need for anything in the middle because it's going to be automated. Of course, a lot of those conversations, I got an argument with a young man who was at an event in Helsinki who was telling me about how robots would soon, in the next 10 years, do everything, and humans would be just living in the lap of luxury. He's about 20 years old, and I was like, keep reading. So what if there were no IT pros? Bunch of text on these slides, but IT would suffer, hardware and software upgrades would not be getting done, a lot of unoptimized systems. Of course, the result of that, management teams would then, obviously, if they don't have the internal resources for this, when they run into those problems, would have no other choice but to outsource that. And that would actually accelerate some of the move to the cloud, and that is happening in some organizations. They're going and getting rid of these resources, thinking, we can move. And so then they become heavily reliant on the outsourced resources. If that happens, a lot of again, without IT pros, they're gone from the earth, right? The cloud vendors will struggle around that because they don't have those. We wouldn't have disaster recovery, business continuity, SLAs would be impacted by that. It'd be a serious issue. And let's be realistic. Developers need to have checks and balances in place. And the IT pros generally provide that real-world balance of, yeah, that's great, guys. This is how it impacts our system. They're not there to provide that guidance. So without those checks and balances, so a lot of, if you've ever been in, we can build it because we can build it. Well, yeah, did you ever ask, should we build it? That voice of reason is gone. So a lot of workloads, honestly, would come to a grinding halt there. My theory, I don't think you people are taking this seriously. This could happen. Okay, if this happened, chaos in the streets. Of course, the lines at Fry's would be really short. I'm okay with that to a certain point. Then it just gets out of hand. That's when it happens. It could happen. And of course, the natural progression there, it realizes that it needs to wipe out humans. It's a bit too much reality in this one, I know. Yep, it would impact life on the planet. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. So let's talk about this. So historically, what the IT pro role is and does, again, I don't need to go through in detail of this, and to be perfectly honest, it is an it depends. When I was thinking of who is the core IT pro that I think of in my mind, there's a gentleman that I worked with this startup back in 2001 that was kind of self-taught on the IT pro realm. I think his degree was actually in history or something. It wasn't, but he'd always been in tech. And so he had been with a couple startups, just really caught on to it, had a mind for it. And here he was at this startup that was going, and when I say startup, it was actually a $180 million VC-funded startup. But he was going and building in charge of infrastructure built out to support this globally managed hosted collaboration platform and supply chain solution. And we had our raised floor. He actually they built out the server room, they built up the environments, maintained these things. He hired a team. He was actually just a fantastic resource. He had one shortcoming that he would take internet and web meetings while using the bathroom, but besides that, very professional. But I think of all these things, my experiences going through and talking about, I remember a customer that had very stringent SLA requirements, wanted to know about business continuity. It's the difference between backup and recovery, of course, and business continuity is the time it took to get the business back up online. Just took it very seriously, and this guy taught me all about that side of things. And so I think there's variances of this in your roles that we do different things. There are people that are the IT pro that are just managing one system. There are others that are much more that are running, the in-house server systems or down at your provider and providing that level of support. And as you look at this, so much of it depends on the workloads that you manage, the level of services that you have in place. But there are so many different options that are out there. And so I just wanted to do something that's kind of broad definition of what IT pro is. And as you're starting to understand what the impacts are, and think about where you need to go, some broad categories. Thinking about the cloud services, again, the mixture of, as being fundamentally a marketing guy, it's all about the marketing mix. You adjust as we move certain workloads, like Exchange to the cloud first. But we have all of our on-prem pieces for communications, for collaboration. What does that then look like? The ramp-up time that's needed to not just go and build out the new services, maintain the balance between, and this is the quiet problem that people don't talk extensively about, is that if you are in hybrid, you're maintaining two systems. So what does that actually mean? What are the impacts to these activities? It's not just a flip the switch, 100% of our systems are now in the cloud and somebody else is managing all of these pieces. That transition over to the cloud, it actually increases the amount of work that needs to be done on both sides during that transition period to be able to balance those things. But the ramp-up time to deploy new services is driving that. You'll have more flexibility, though, on the work schedule. If more of what you're doing is becoming virtual, then more of that can be done from anywhere. Actually, my father-in-law was over in China for 2 years teaching English for fun, just over there with my mother-in-law, but the entire time maintaining servers for his company out of California. He had to come back for some serious issues, and some planning exercises, but otherwise was able to do his job remotely for 2 years, which is just pretty incredible. 10 years ago, there's no way that was possible. But the downside to that is as we get more virtual, there is this expectation that we're always online. Microsoft just came out with that Work Anywhere. Did anybody see the backlash from that marketing campaign that started, the meme that started around that? Like, you're at your children's soccer game, working, fantastic, Look at that. I'm trying to have a nice romantic home, but wait, there's a phone call. Hang on, So there's that expectation that we're on all the time, and a lot of us we just do that because we can. We're not asking, should we? But we do have increased mobility for employees. There is that growing outsourced managed service opportunity. And from a small to medium business opportunity, there's a lot of potential opportunity for IT pros that are looking at going and taking on multiple customers. The downside is that, hey, you may not be fully employed with one customer, but you have the ability to go and manage multiple customers because of the flexibility of some of these models. One of the other concerns or impacts is that there's less of the technical work, the architecture around that, but more an increase in the architecture, the planning. You have somebody who understands what systems are here, what the cloud options are, and managing those for customers. So there's a lot of this. I talk a lot and write a lot about the rise of the role of the business analyst. Now, business analyst, I think for most companies, think of it as a more junior role. Having worked with Cisco, where business analysts can be a very senior technical role. In fact, comparing to some other companies, are kind of at a fellow level. They're very senior folks. Understand both technical and business systems. But there's going to be a need for people that understand the technology, understand the services, but also the business, and can communicate that for the non-techs. So there's a number of different things that are required. And there's a great article out of Tech Republic that I've got the link in the slides here, where you can get the detail around each one of these things. But the new capabilities required. A lot of, again, that analysis, that strategic skill set. And some of the feedback from people in the community is that these things and this shift, realistically, are going to be very hard for most IT pros. A lot of IT pros are not necessarily people persons. Just being fair. So a lot of these things mean that there's an increased interaction with the business side and communication, and it might not be a strength of some folks, but there's tremendous opportunity around this area. I want to jump into this. Voices from the community. So here's how I kind of advertised. I do these tweet jams. If you've never been in a tweet jam, simple model. Yes, it's on Twitter. Some people say, why not use Yammer? Because Twitter's open to the world. And because this tweet jam, if you're impressed by metrics that you don't understand, we had over 3.6 million impressions on the tweets that went out. That means potentially that many people saw those well, not 3.6 million, but 3.6 million tweet images. And you know how Twitter works. It flies by. It flies by. But there's actually this program, there's this site called Storify, where I've gone and actually captured the entire conversation. So you can go to this link, scroll through, and see all of the answers from the individuals throughout the tweet jam. But what we do is we open this up, there's a panel of experts, and we ask 6 to 8 questions. And over the course of an hour, via Twitter, just using a hashtag, we have this conversation. And anyone can jump in. So we have people that aren't panelists, that are just out in the community, that suddenly see Twitter jump into life, and then just jump in and share their opinions. And they're fantastic. For somebody who does a lot of blogging and writing and articles for various magazines and sites, it's a huge resource for content and getting opinions and finding expertise out in the community. So for this one, these are the questions that I asked. What is the role? Where do IT pro and developer paths cross? How important is, well, see, SharePoint. I'm a SharePoint guy. Is IT pro to SharePoint deployment success? How does it change as it moves to the cloud? What's the relationship between Microsoft and the IT pro? That was a great question. A lot of heartfelt answers came back from that. How does it impact the partner and the customer ecosystem? And then what did people that are new to the ranks need to do? So these are the questions that I asked. I'm going to share some of the answers that came back. Then what I did is I went and followed up in depth with individuals in the community, about 30 people, and took a number of quotes. So I'm just going to be now talking to their feedback. So what do IT pros do? Eli talked about building, managing the tech foundations to support the business. Shane Young, yes, thank you, Shane, saving the world from zombies. To design and provide IT services for all. To create and manage solutions that solve business problems. Make sure the systems are up and running and effective. And again, Dan Holm talking about solving business problems with technology, managing costs and risk of those services. Stacy talked about making things work before the rest of the company gets a hold of it. Enabling the business to do their job. And that's really, that's the core. It's not about, while we all like to think that our jobs are some of the most important in the world, it's, we're deploying these systems not for our own benefit. It's so that the business can be more productive, get more work done, do their work. And so that's the role of the IT pro, is to make sure that things are running, remain up, to keep the infrastructure purring and support all other roles. And that's an important one there. And Mark said, sadly, they're often a barrier. How many times do you go and say, look, this is what the business needs, this is what we need to go and do? And I look at it from the pragmatic side of the IT pros are saying, look, this is the impact to what you're asking me to do. And there's a lot of pushback. I've had that experience. And we'll come back to those comments. To make sure everything works, to stay on the phone with Premier Support. Yes. Thank you, Greg. And again, we should all play the role of IT pro. To some extent, yes. I think if you're an information worker in general, there's more that we need to be able to do. But I disagree in the fact that I think that it stays a specialized role, that there are certain people that have that knowledge, that understand the system side of it, and we need those people doing that. It's my opinion. But in most businesses, IT pro is the one-stop shop person. I mean, certainly in SharePoint, and I know I've seen this with Exchange extensively, is the IT pro is also the developer, is also the tester, is doing all of those things. Yeah, we get that. You're in a minority if the IT pro person is a specialty focused on just IT pro role. It's usually the multiple hats that are worn. I think it was the IT pro role needs to become tech strategy, business analysis, configuration, admin, support, kind of all those things. And I think that is happening. So the difference between IT pro and dev, Shane talks about IT pro enables, dev is one of the sources of those solutions, so building those and extending those things. The roles are converging. So admins more and more are doing scripting, doing PowerShell, and coders need to understand the business analysts and often manage their solutions. Now again, you could say that if you're wearing multiple hats, I mean, that's where you're seeing that convergence. Tools are converging, but I don't think roles are. So Dan disagrees right off the top, that it's not converging, that they're separate activities. Jasper talks about, sets up the staging environment where the devs can work their magic or break things. John, they're IT pros are the architects, devs are the general contractors. Bjorn said a good dev should have deep knowledge on it, on IT pro tasks and vice versa. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things, if you want to improve how the two work together, is understand where those handoffs are, those trade-offs. Jim says, I'm in both roles, plus BA, business process design. Yeah, again, multiple hats there. Is the IT pro role changing? Definitely. Becomes even more important. Think about hybrid scenarios and identity management. Jeffrey Schwartz, who writes for Redmond Magazine, if you're not familiar with Jeffrey, says, yes, because they are managing both infrastructure they can touch and a service they have limited control of. So that's where it's changing. That is a key differentiator with the cloud services, is that you have less control over that, and understanding where those lines are drawn between service and the pieces that you own 100% of. Dan Barker, who's with Nintex, says the cloud should improve IT pros' speed to value, cadence, back to the business, and this is a great thing. Shane, IT pros having to better understand identity. Mark Cashman, yeah, but I changed the word changing to evolving. Mark is the one who asked me to do this session. Yeah, so that's where this conversation actually started, was back in October around some of that feedback. And Eli, sure, cloud means less infrastructure and platform management, more integration, identity, and bring your own device management. We're not even scratched the surface of that. That's a difficult thing right there to hand off to someone else to manage that. Bill Baer talked about, yes, but it's evolving. Hybrid is the fulcrum on which that transformation pivots. IT can now blur the lines between the cloud and on-prem. They become a value-added service broker versus system administrator. I think that is the key right there. Of course, in the IT pro world, especially the SharePoint side, hopefully everybody knows Bill. I'm happy to give out his work email. I always joke to Bill that I give out his email address in every session, but I really do. Bill is Bill here? Oh, he's not going to say if he is anyway. He actually is, for especially the SharePoint side of things, like he is Mr. IT Pro. Great perspective. Microsoft would really hurt if Bill ever left. He's very happy there because they're keeping him happy because they know that. Jasper, I would be mega excited if I was an IT pro. I don't know if Jasper is an IT pro, if other people would be really excited. Love Jasper. I'm not beating up on Jasper. John White, IT pro role is moving up the business value stack with cloud, less break fix, more solutions. McNulty, the cloud covers remote integration, VM, security, federation, bring your own device, identity management. It is more fun than just standing up servers. If you can hand off that piece and worry about the rest of the services. There you are, Fernando. You're in there. Yeah, you're welcome. Talk about even in the cloud, users need to call someone for IT help. It's true. I think that's an important distinction here, is that with the roles, again, it depends on what those services are, but those things just don't go away because the business is still going to have those questions, no matter where the infrastructure resides. How is Microsoft treating IT pros? Yeah. Mark, you mean the relationship of Bill Baer and IT pros? Yeah. Now he knows that it's going to set up a flurry of, can I get Bill's email? Questions. Microsoft is the dungeon master. IT pros are the players. That's it. That's worthy of a T-shirt right there. It's about recalibrating as Microsoft embraces hybrid and IT pros feel safe, because it has been a shift over the last year and a half, 2 years, that Microsoft is really talking about what that means and embracing hybrid. Microsoft and IT Pro are entering an open relationship phase. Yeah, that's right. It's complicated. Yeah. That T-shirt does exist for SharePoint. The direction of the platform is challenging the IT pro to evolve, same as others. So you need to continue to evolve. And I talked about, as the technology evolves, so will the needs of the ecosystem. And we need to adapt. Dan says, I say what we're all thinking, honestly think, oh, no, it's another Bill. I think I just put that in case he got worried. Bill is awesome. In a decoupled cloud service world, Microsoft has to sustain value to maintain IT pro mindshare. That's true. There's some, I would, again, admit that Microsoft needs to do some work around maintaining that. I think I duplicated that. Dang it. Advice for the new IT pros, people coming in. Go through the exams. Learning is the most important skill you bring to the table. Constantly learn and adapt. Understand what's happening out in the community. People skills, more than ever. Business process, etc. Jim says they need to understand the business users, and how to solve their problems. Business analysis, finance, law, abstract thinking, management, and whatever tech happens to be in today. Understand the cloud stack, not just the Microsoft stack, because they are all in play now, regardless of what shop you are in. And this is an important distinction, is that I think gone, not that they were ever truly here, but Gone are the days when any company is 100% any stack, any vendor. And no matter how Microsoft-centric we are in the primary business solutions, you know you're seeing this. Your end users are going and they're using these other systems, usually unsupported competing platforms. And so the IT pro, the IT pros are having to constantly go and juggle, identify what those are. In some case, they're being asked to support those things and create a unified management of or visibility, transparency across all of those systems. Ben says, how to address business problems, not just blinky lights problems. Sleep is overrated. Yeah, get used to that. The landscape is changing. Embrace it, understand it, figure what you can and can't control, and keep those lights on. So the deep dive here, is the role changing? Here's just the summary of the feedback that came from, yes, it is evolving. It is changing. It's not disappearing, just changing, but hybrid is here for the long haul. It is. Microsoft is talking about, again, from the SharePoint perspective, there was all this chatter in the last 2 years, like, oh my gosh, the last conference, SharePoint wasn't mentioned in the keynote 5 times. It was only mentioned 3 times. What does that mean? And then as hybrid becomes more and more important in organizations, you're hearing more of the scenarios. But Microsoft is now coming back and saying, we'll develop these tools, we'll support these things into the foreseeable future. As people still need them and are still buying them, we're going to continue to support them, we're going to continue to innovate on them. So on-prem is not going away as long as businesses need them, require them, or buying them. So they're not talking about putting end dates on any of these things, unless they've put an end date on it. Then they are. Hybrid's here for the long haul. Focus is turning from infrastructure to services. The focus is moving from the back end to the front end. So it's all about those business solutions and what's delivered. So you've seen this in some of the comments, and we'll get a little bit more in some of the comments around the deep dive. Need to become a specialist in the various areas. The business needs someone who understands the cloud and mobile, and specifically what the business needs. It's not just about understanding the technology, but what's unique to the business requirements. You will be expected to do more, sleep less, all those things. So is the role changing? For those that don't know Susan's fantastic, was one of the people who started the SharePoint Saturday movement. What is it, 6 years ago? Are we 7 years? I don't remember. It might be 7 years now. Absolutely. Even for those of us in verticals, we're cloud. So she's in the Department of Defense, military. She works on that side of Microsoft. It's always a conversation, a topic with our customers. If cloud is part of the offering, then IT Pro has to change. They're no longer operating and maintaining the servers that replaced by a cloud service. Michael Doyle, Mr. SharePoint Ninja. Yes, the role of the IT Pro is constantly changing. So he used to do a lot with SQL and back-end data analysis, but now the skills that he uses are the front-end capabilities. So he's asked to own the service end-to-end while he's spending more time with the customers, with the end users, building out the front of that solution. Mark Anderson, talking about, we work in an industry that undergoes near constant change. IT Pro role is changing, sure, and this will not be the last time. It's not the first. And this is a great comment. Mark and I, we've talked about this a bunch, was the fact that the IT pros that are so like, it's changing, what's going on? It's like, where have you been? This has always been the case of the IT pro role. It's always been the case. It may be a slightly different evolution of change that's happening, but we've always been in a state of change within IT in general, but certainly within the IT pro role. So you're coming into this, and let's be honest, a lot of us came into this space, into technology because of that change. To a certain extent, we're adrenaline junkies. We like the new technology. We want to be able to adapt and try new things. And we thrive on being able to add that value to the rest of the business. So one change, he says, this is still Mark, that we need to get more comfortable working directly with end users. Anyone who can't demonstrate tangible, impactful, visible results should be thinking how they could change that. Yeah, that is the key. Working with the front office, working with the customers directly, rather than just keeping, wiring the office, keeping the servers humming. It's not enough anymore. Joseph Nielsen. I'm looking at you, Joseph. The role is metamorphosing into a specialist in hybrid, federated authentication, architecture, interoperability, and network connectivity. So, it's true that the percentage of companies that are moving 100% in the cloud are the smallest. It makes sense. If you're starting a new business, why are you going and setting up the infrastructure? It's cost effective just to go 100% into the cloud. But for organizations that have made usually ample investments in on-prem infrastructure, you need to look at, it's not a matter of just the cost, hey, it's cheaper to move over here. What is the transition cost? What are the investments that have been made? Have you yet gotten the return on investment for what you've already spent? So it might be 5 to 7 years before you can then start looking at making that transition. Paul Colmsey, good friend of mine, is based out of Perth. How are IT pros reacting to this change? Not well for many, but probably in line with any other group going through adaptive change. So that whole early adopter, laggards, so forth, that cycle, we're very much following that. There are some IT pros that are out embracing that. What can I do to better support my business? And there are always those that are on the back end of that change cycle that are fighting it tooth and nail along the way. So where are you on that adoption cycle? Robert Toro with Slalom talks about, many are on the path to evolving their skills from installing and maintaining server farms to becoming in-house consultants. Of course, the consultant says that. That help drive high-level architecture decisions. So bringing somebody in who can help the business understand what are the impacts. If we go and adopt this, if we do an integration to this other cloud service, what does that mean, not just to our systems, but to our business processes? And you need to have the systems person, the IT pro, sitting there answering those questions and providing that feedback. Otherwise, you're not going to adequately mitigate the risks of that decision. So they're becoming key to the business being able to adapt to a lot of these changes. I know what happens. I've seen it. I've been in organizations where our CEO or CIO are on an airplane and they read those damn in-flight magazines about whatever the latest technology is and get all excited about that and come back, and then it's just like you're pulling your hair. It's like, it doesn't fit at all. What are you talking about? But being able to have that conversation and being able to explain how that fits and what those impacts are. Eric Overfield, Pixel Mill, talks about, find that many are slow to adapt, but those that are finding they can still be of use when they rethink their role as the server person. And it's true, we see that across the board. I can have do enough events, I'm at like 2 or 3 events a month, and have this conversation over and over and over again. And people just ask, like, what do you think I should be doing? And we kind of dig in. It's almost like, and I thought even of having a prop of like this laid back, this recliner chair, like, come, tell me about your mother, lay down, let's talk. But when we dig into the detail of what they're doing in their role and provide some guidance, this is what I've seen, this is what people are telling me about the role. Does the role go away? Nick Kellett, who's the CTO with StoneShare up in Ottawa, no, quite the opposite. The cloud is going to accelerate opportunities to find business value, and the more end-user developers and power users there are, the more in demand the IT pro role will be. Russ Edelman talks about it. Again, doesn't go away, just evolves into the less physical and more virtual and blended or hybrid. Adam Levithan with Metalogic says, no, IT pros are needed to create infrastructures as service environments for the providers and maintain those things. So again, as we're going out, we want to go out in the cloud. I did this in my presentation yesterday, talked about it's really about the build versus buy, the in-house versus outsource. And depending on what the workload is, you might be in a different quadrant of what is possible. And then the IT pro is needed to make all of those pieces work together. Lorian talks about, firmly believe the IT pro role will be rationalized over the years as cloud matures. There will be fewer technical people required to run IT systems, and we're starting to already see that. There are some fewer technical roles, but it's building up, it's increasing on the business side. Whether it's a business analyst or consulting-like role internally, it's being offset, it's shifting. I said overall headcount, I don't believe is going down. It's just shifting where that is. Paul again talked about managed service IT providers are already suffering the effects of this from reduced margins and tighter business conditions. you can kind of see where Paul believes things are. He's more on it's going away. The role is going away. So we had people that are all over the continuum here. Right now, many IT pros think that they'll simply manage servers and infrastructures in the cloud. He doesn't believe it'll last either. And he says, just look to how Microsoft and Google and other players are investing in automation on those platforms. As an entrepreneur, somebody that started a couple companies, I always look at it a little bit differently. I said there's a certain degree of being an entrepreneur in there are the roles, is looking at the changes and figuring out how do I stay relevant. But that goes back to the comment that in the IT pro role and technology in general, we've always had to do that because technology changes so quickly. And so we constantly need to learn and adjust. If you do not change, if you're not out there learning that new technology, if you're not constantly looking at, is my role relevant, then this is exactly what's going to happen. This will happen. Your role will go away. But that's true in just about any function, technology or not. Chris McNulty with CryptZone talks about the nature of the role is becoming less like Sears and more like Nordstrom. Sears used to provide a full catalog, so you kind of go in there, a la carte. Today, Nordstrom provides a guided experience to a more limited range of services and takes a best-of-breed approach to curating self-built and repacked solutions to a single guided experience. I haven't had that experience. I don't shop at Nordstrom's. But that idea, too, is an important one for the IT pro. And Microsoft is shifting this, and it's not a small change in their messaging as they're talking about services. Microsoft has introduced the word experiences, right? What is an experience? An experience is something that is the end-to-end across multiple workloads. It's no longer about the vertical of a feature or a workload. Exchange, SharePoint, Skype, each of those workloads. It's now about the experience which goes across those. You need to think of the IT pro role as, again, moving to that horizontal experiences across your business systems. It's kind of what Chris is talking about. I think so. It's how I'm interpreting it, but he does have nice shoes. Pat Esposito talks about they become more consultative. They excel at vendor management. They go deeper into SLAs and performance monitoring. Trev Gatt, he is a project server MVP. So they're going to become highly specialized for a few companies and some government. The role of the master builder, to steal a term from the Lego movie, will become more in demand as business needs someone to formulate solutions from packages. Lorian, again, he's being cheeky. They're all going to serve coffee. But seriously, there will be less of them. So he thinks that it'll ultimately disappear. So he's at one end of the spectrum there. Those that are IT pros will be more like system administrators. The new IT pro will be the technologist who understands business. So what he's saying is not that the work that needs to be done is going away, that the title or how we look at it today will evolve into that business. So he's actually right on par with what everybody else is saying. Chris again says he's more of an integrator and less an implementer. So it's been implemented on his behalf or it's been virtualized. Go and look at like CloudShare, Rackspace, and Azure, and Amazon have this where you have this auto provisioning. The ability to go in minutes, like this is the configuration of the SharePoint server that I need. Here's the version, I'm trying to duplicate for my production system this. I can go within minutes and have a staging or development environment up in the cloud and get access to that. So one perspective in the future. So Nick Kellett shared, so he's written extensively about this, and he talks about really four major virtues that the IT pro can assist the business with. He talks about the discipline, so the effort required to understand how the technology works. So going in and understand, what is my role, what am I trying to do for the business? And this is where learning about what else the business needs and my level of expertise in those things. If you're increasingly building out and supporting virtualized environments, like I went at Microsoft where we went and did our initial hosted SharePoint environments, and it was like we signed a customer, and this is Microsoft, and it is 2006 when I had this experience, but we signed on a customer, very large customer, number 2 for hosted SharePoint. But we said, all right, they're asking for a time frame for building out the infrastructure for the new environment. and went to good friend, teammate Derek O'Loughlin, and he said, yeah, we have to order the servers. Like, we don't have the servers? We're Microsoft. How do we not have the servers ready to go and do? He's like, yeah, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get this stuff together. He says, I'm going to go try and re-provision, but I just don't have the hardware for it. And we're Microsoft. Now, versus that, I leave the company. I go to this small startup, fewer than 30 people, called Echo Technology that was doing SharePoint migration software. And walk in the office. It was a little bit loud. There's a big cabinet with all of our Hyper-V. And so, going and building out environments was walking over to the noisy box, opening it up with the fans going, and that's where our Hyper-V was being managed. Now, we moved that to a data center in downtown Seattle, but that's how that was. And of course, then I had another company. I had the virtual environment on my laptop. I'm walking around with a full SharePoint server on my laptop, which is just incredible to think about 5 years earlier, joining the SharePoint team and going to customers and having trouble getting a solid internet connection out of the customer site to be able to demo stuff on our hosted environment. Just the world has changed so much. So discipline, the vision, so providing the roadmap, having the vision for the organization and the end users. Communication. Again, let's be honest, can be difficult for a lot of people that are traditionally IT pro roles. But it's going to become increasingly critical. And if you go and look at some of those that have been the most successful within the IT pro realm, are those that are really good at communicating. And then showing leadership. Going and being the person that has the answers, that are aware of the changes that are going on, that is aware of the latest of what Microsoft is doing and what's happening. And not just reciting what the messaging is coming out of Redmond, but having an opinion of those things, of how it impacts your business. That is going to be critical. That is right there, and then to communicate those things, both spoken and written, by the way. Sorry, those turn spell check on. But showing leadership are going to be critical to this role going forward. So how do you stay relevant? Lorian talked about this. I was an IT pro, and I'm an agent of change. I hate that phrase. But he runs a small consulting company. And so he still has a number of people that have that role, but they're not keeping up with the rest of the business, and they're starting to drop off. So people that are going and thinking of this broader consultative role, and that it has both the technology and the business. How do you stay relevant? Treb says, learn about non-core technologies to your job. Play with them. Know what's going on. I do this constantly. I go and understand what's happening in the partner ecosystem. What solutions are available? I have no intention of buying the majority of those things, but I want to know what's innovative about those things and why the solutions that we've selected don't have those features. Like why? What do we need? What makes sense? Nick says, learning more about open source development, writing an open source framework for Internet of Things as a hobby. So trying a variety of cloud solution offerings to see the benefits and limitations of each one. So experimenting with those things. And that's another great thing about this change is so many of these things, like you don't have to have hardware to install and play with these things. So when the vendors like provide a package like download and install or just use out in Azure, go play with it. Get an environment. They're pushing that stuff on you. And then the problem is that you have all these logins that you're managing, remembering which is which. That's why I just write it on a text file that's on my desktop. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Agnes says, be agile, love to learn, be open to new challenges. I mean, so true. These aren't just platitudes. That is so much within that is the case. Recommendations, Russ says, learn the cloud, security models associated with the cloud, integrated and hybrid strategies, and next-gen application model development and support. Asif talks about IT pros have to understand that it's not about maintaining servers, it's about managing services. You start calling your on-prem environments services. Start training your teams to think about it as services. In-house service, outsourced services, so you have the private and public services. Start calling it that, and they'll start forgetting it's irrelevant to the end user, to the business, where the servers sit, whether it's under your desk, on a raised floor, or halfway around the world. They don't care. So don't define yourself about where the servers, in your roles, where the servers are, but about the services you're providing for the business. Joel Olson talks about, don't think dev skills are irrelevant. So as well as your ability to stay on the cutting edge and adapt to change is key, go broad and deep to beat out your competition. That's true. Like you're constantly learning. Susan came back, 40 years of experience, always be learning and open to change, or you shouldn't be in technology. And then this is a great point, always be involved in the community. The more you give, the more you'll receive. As a big community guy too, I mean, certainly if you're not in the SharePoint community and aren't aware of how passionate and massive the SharePoint community is, I know it's big, and it's funny that the SharePoint Saturday actually was based on the SQL Saturday model. But there are great communities out there in the Microsoft space. Definitely get involved if you're not already. And Greg Frick, who is actually, so I'm on the board for the Puget Sound SharePoint user group, the PS Spug, and Greg has been running that for over 8 years now. Says, I recommend that people get involved in user groups and professional organizations. These kinds of organizations support us as humans and community, and they provide us with lots of information, knowledge, and wisdom related to our professional growth and skills. And these are the best places to be learning about the changes that are happening and how others are learning from those and adapting to those changes. Nick Kellett says the half-life of technical knowledge is incredibly short. You need to simultaneously dive deep into a few complementary technologies so you can understand in gory detail how to use them. Eric says, just because Microsoft manages the hardware, operating system, and primary software does not mean that there will not be integration and internal maintenance issues. I mean, that's always the truth. The truth is that there's the marketing, there's the story of what's coming out, and some of it is part vision, part real. Then there's the reality of executing that vision in your environment. And there will be, for a long time, until we have the hover vehicles, there will be that need for people that can, again, that end-to-end experience to make sure that it is working smoothly within your organization. So Robert Turo, who is the Portal and Collab practice director for Slalom here in Chicago, is Rob here? I don't think he is. Is any of the Slalom team here from his team? Can you yell at Rob for not being here? But he talks about focus on learning the cloud platform vendors and offerings, including the cost models and all the service level agreements. I'll tell you what, there's not enough people that are looking at the SLAs around some of these cloud services and not fully understanding those impacts. As a consulting company going in and working with customers that have gone and bought into these tools and then complaining that they're not getting help fast enough, I said, are they not meeting their SLAs? Oh no, they are meeting the SLAs. You just didn't factor their SLA like Office 365's SLA into your SLA for your customer, for your team. You need to factor those things in and understand what that now looks like end to end. Know the incumbent and challenger platforms in your vertical. Pay attention to where the innovation is occurring and be able to recommend new technologies. Just like I said, constantly be learning about what others are doing. Learn identity management models and have a working knowledge of identity management authentication protocols. And then be a thought leader. So this is coming from somebody who is running the SharePoint collaboration practice for one of the largest NSIs here in the US, fairly consistent with the feedback from the rest of the community. What is the future of the IT Pro? Yeah, we're this superhero with the unicorn as the logo. We're just asked in the IT Pro role to do it all. This really is, I'll go back and say that, this really is more of a conversation. You can see that there's a lot of ideas, some of them conflicting. Some people are very doom and gloom. And I kind of laughed and said that, hey, a product wasn't mentioned in the keynote. It is amazing at how quickly people go and say, they're no longer supporting this platform because it wasn't demoed as part of the keynote. We got that a year and a half ago about SharePoint things. Like, SharePoint wasn't mentioned. It was all Office 365. Therefore, Microsoft is defunding SharePoint. And this week it was, what are they not saying about Yammer? Maybe not the best comparison, because I've got some questions about Yammer versus groups. But let's just go to say that. Look, they're human. They're focusing on specific messages that they're trying to get out. Microsoft. They're focusing on specific messages. They're not going to be perfect. But that's part of our jobs, is to go out and interpret what those things mean, and specifically what they mean for our businesses. I do have a couple resources that are part of this. There's this great article. It's a couple years old. You can see that IT Pro's job in 2011. It's actually a great list out on Tech Republic, and I pulled for part of this. And then again, the second link on this is the Storify scroll through in detail an hour-long tweet jam with all of the feedback from people within the SharePoint community. It's worth a read. It really is well worth it to go look through that. And of course you have the IT Pro resources on TechNet. And it's funny, like I still have in my browser bookmarked all of these various Microsoft and key people blogs and sites, various sites, as I'm going through just making sure to add them to this list. They've all been slowly folded in, and it really just points now to the Office blog and the Office 365 network on Yammer as kind of the two defining sources for IT Pro content. Yeah, there's the TechNet resources. Honestly, there's not a lot out there. I don't know how fresh some of that content is. All of the conversation around this is happening out in those two locations. But ongoing, this is something that would love to keep the dialogue going. If there are specific questions, I mean, I know we're just about out of time. We've just have a couple minutes. But if you have questions, I'd love to hear them. But otherwise, you can email me. I think, do I have my contact info? There we go. Feel free to drop me a line around this. Yes, you got all the slides that are out there. But if you want to have a discussion around the role, I would love to talk to you about this. And I'd be happy to put you in touch. If you don't know any of the individuals that were quoted in this, I'd be happy to provide an introduction as well. So thanks a lot for coming. Have a great day, and thank you very much.